Welcome to the extended version of this lesson on Universal Story Language in action. We've just covered some of the resources you can use to hammer home the lessons we've covered in this course. And now, let's take another look at our very first example, Die Hard, to see how it uses each step of USL. It's time for a super in-depth example of Die Hard. Die Hard's setup shows us protag John as he lands in LA. He hops in a limo and heads to his wife's Christmas party to rekindle their marriage. We meet his wife, Holly, and her colleagues. Die Hard creates instant identification when we see John bringing a giant bear through the airport, a gift for his family that makes us identify with our gruff protag. This phase introduces John's want, which is arguably protection and/or love, and his flaw, which is stubbornness and/or an inability to apologize. And we see this flaw flare up as the pair argue in a bathroom. But there's not much time to argue as the catalyst crashes in the form of Antag Hans Gruber, international terrorist, alongside his many henchmen. Thankfully, John is still in the bathroom, and he escapes just in time. This catalyst clearly happens to John. And, like most action and thriller stories, the opportunity is more about survival than gaining something, since this is a problem catalyst. But there is still some prospect to this, because if he saves the day, he may rekindle his marriage. This also establishes the goal and the stakes. Stop the terrorists, or John/his wife will die. Easy to understand and very captivating. In part because the goal is specific, tangible, and binary, and the stakes are about survival. You'll also notice that this catalyst sets up an obligatory scene, which will obviously be John facing Hans Gruber. The hesitation phase is next, and the main question it poses is, what will John do? Will he escape or stick around? He spies on Gruber to get more intel as Gruber brings Holly's boss upstairs and shoots him, a clear indicator of the dangers of John sticking around and fighting. This is also a clear warning to John of what could happen if he tries to save the day. He also sees henchmen with missiles, another warning of the dangers ahead. But John wants to continue, and the outer gateway is his first step. He pulls a fire alarm even though it will alert Gruber that John is in the building. This is a clear action John takes to start pursuing his goal of defeating the terrorists. And the external change, though subtle, is a situational one of cat and mouse. Gruber now knows John is in the building, and a clock is set on John's life. The testing phase shows John killing a terrorist, getting supplies including detonators, and taunting Gruber. He also gathers intel and manages to call the police for help. You can see John is finding his footing in the new situation, and the new situation is emphasized by the unfinished area of the building, helping to contrast it from the ordinary world of Act 1. Then, the moment of danger shows Gruber sending his henchmen after John. This both showcases the Antag and highlights his power, and it is still a cutaway, even if we constantly jump back and forth throughout the movie. The uphill climb showcases John taking out two henchmen and trying to get a police officer's attention, which he does by throwing a body onto the hood of the car. You can see these are a series of successes that clearly point to the midpoint, which is when the cops will arrive. Things are also getting more dangerous than they were in the testing phase, another mark of the uphill climb. Then we get to our midpoint, when the full police force arrives. We can tell this is the midpoint because it's a false victory. The police tell John they'll handle it from here. This is our midpoint prize. But the midpoint prize comes a few minutes earlier, when Gruber realizes John has his detonators. This means John isn't off the hook, and he'll be hunted down by more henchmen. This also raises the stakes, making this journey even more dangerous for John. Another price comes in the form of the deputy and the news anchor, who are both secondary antags providing tension with John. The downhill fall swings in with full force, starting with the henchmen killing the police and blowing up their armored vehicle. Gruber kills one of Holly's colleagues, but not before the colleague reveals John's identity, which makes the news. One henchman now has a personal vengeance against John, and at the end of the downhill fall, John comes face to face with Gruber. He's trapped in a cubicle and surrounded by glass. Oh, and he's barefoot. Like most action movies, the obstacles are mainly external. But don't you see how bad things are getting? This is typical of the downhill fall, as things get worse and worse, and these could definitely be considered failures of the new situation. Then we get our moment of peril, when John escapes but leaves the detonators. Now, the detonators are in Gruber's hands, and they could all be toast. This is clearly the worst thing that could happen to John, since he might get blown up, but also the worst thing that could happen to the journey, since John is trying to stop the terrorists, not give them the tools to blow up the building. We enter rock bottom as John hobbles into the bathroom, his foot bloody and full of glass. This is a great rock bottom, as it showcases the protag at their lowest point, in this case, barely alive. Surviving and his goal seem impossible. But as John talks to his police friend over the radio, he glimpses his epiphany, typical of the rock bottom. As Gruber gets into the safe, which is a continuation of the moment of peril, John undergoes a great inner gateway as he asks his police friend to apologize to his wife. After all, he said, "I love you," but never that he's sorry. And even though John is beaten and bruised with a bloody foot, he recommits to his goal and sets off to the roof to figure out Gruber's plans. John makes it to the roof and finds a ton of explosives and a vengeful henchman. Typical of the final plan, John must defeat the henchman under Gruber before Gruber himself. He dodges FBI helicopters and we get a big explosion, the big sequences we expect in the final plan. We also watch a secondary character, Argyle the limo driver, beat up one of Gruber's henchmen, as the final plan is usually where secondary characters shine. Then we reach the story climax, where John must face Gruber and his last henchman with only 2 bullets left. However, thanks to an ingenious trick, which we won't spoil, John manages to defeat both and save Holly. In a climax twist, Gruber almost pulls Holly out of the window, but John stops him and sends him falling to his death. John and Holly kiss, and John has succeeded entirely. He saved himself and his wife, defeated the terrorists, and fixed his marriage. Not bad for one night. Then our aftermath shows the aftermath. John and Holly stagger out, meet John's police friend Powell, and get picked up by Argyle. And in the end, John and Holly head home, kissing on Christmas, a feel-good end to this action-fueled film. This shows us how things have changed because of the journey and mirrors the setup by showing John with Holly in the limo where before he was without her. And of course, as mentioned, the big kiss is a staple of this phase. As you can see, Die Hard follows the steps of USL closely. This may be because USL and other story models are in part based on movies like Die Hard. However, if you look through the extended breakdowns included in this megacourse, you will see plenty of examples of new stories that still follow these steps just as closely as Die Hard does. And with that, we have reached the end of this course on universal story language. We know it's a lot of information, so feel free to review it a few times over the next few months to really lock in this knowledge. And of course, now that we have all this knowledge, we should look at how to use it. So, in the next mini course, which we call Harnessing Your Story's Core, we'll be diving into 7 different types of ideas and how you can flesh them out into a story, how to fix your first draft with USL, and how these concepts might change from medium to medium. See you there.